I'm Craig Constantine. Welcome to the Movers Mindset Podcast, where I talk with movement enthusiasts to learn who they are, what they do, and as I always say, why they do it. My guest today is René Scavington. Welcome, René. How are you this afternoon?
A little sluggish.
I hope that's a good thing.
End of the workday, and I gotta go back to work later, actually. So
we, as everybody knows by now, had a chance to talk before this, and the first thing we did was that I don't know if we ever actually talked before. We may have done a like a hey there, or nice to see you kind of thing at Art of Retreat or something, but I don't think we've ever talked before. So first of all, thanks so much for taking the leap and joining me on Craig's craziness. There are like three really major different directions we could go here, and I'm like, it's only so much time. But tell me about, because I want to get to talking about Resilient, your new project that's coming out. I want to talk about that. I know you want to talk about that, but tell me about like the way that you think about training, and then maybe how you used to think, oh, I'm going to train like this, and that's going to let me do X. But in reality, what you wound up doing was something different. It kind of feels like what is going into Resilient.
Okay, I'm going to try to run through this pretty quick, and if there's any part that you want me to stop and elaborate, just
I'll wave
yell at me.
frantically.
But I'm just passing the 2-decade mark. So when I got into parkour, it was in my late teens, and originally it was like, I am going to be Batman. I was actually doing karate at the time too. I was big into fitness, and parkour came along, and I'm like, these all make sense together. Here we go. Vigilante by night, film student by day. And then with the friends that I got into through parkour, we all kind of wanted to eventually have a space. I had a team. My initial team was called Zanshin Studios, and we made video projects. The first time I showed up to a parkour jam was with a camera to film it, and it just became this thing where that was the direction parkour was going to go: was stunts, performances, video
visual
projects, that whole thing. And then about 3 years in is when I got into coaching. So by around actually less than 3 years, 2 years into parkour, I got into coaching. I got my first official coaching gig in 2006. For the city of West Vancouver, which was a long commute for me. And then just as time went on, that became sort of the main direction. As far as my own training went, it became much more performance-based. I had a lot of bigger goals. Anytime I hit a plateau, it was always pretty difficult to stay motivated in the early days. I think in the early days of parkour, a lot of people quit because they didn't have direction. And so when I finally had more direction, and this kind of came more after like 2010 and opening the gym and actually social media, seeing like more athletes more frequently and seeing like their different styles, I started to kind of narrow in on the type of parkour that I wanted to do. And it became more and more performance-based and more driven towards that. So it became a lot of off-season heavy lifting, which I got a little bit more known for. Became centered around.
You have a lot of tutorials on like parkour prep and things and how to train.
Yeah, how big can I get my jump? And around that time too, it was like all about health and being like the fittest man on the planet, aside from Batman. So then I tore my Achilles tendon. And actually shed a tear, not because of the pain, but I think because it was this kind of moment where all of a sudden I was no longer invincible. I think up until that point, I felt very much invincible. I was 29 and trained all the time.
How many years
probably
in?
Overtrained. That was, 2015, 2004. It's 11 years in.
Yeah, so I'm like you're as far from that now as you were from beginning. I was just trying to get a feel for like, all right. So I'm drawing a line. It's like down to the Achilles tendon, and then
yeah, and I knew I was going to be able to come back from it and everything. I didn't know exactly what that was going to look like, but part of what I was determined to do was to come back better. And about 2 years after the tear is when I actually feel like I started to realize that, and part of it just, again, it's amazing what happens when you actually narrow your focus a little bit on exactly what you want to do. So if I'm going out and doing parkour and trying to get not really having a focus, not really having like what I like or what I'm drawn to, you tend to progress a little bit slower. So I feel like because I narrowed my focus and I said I want to get better at these specific things, that's when I really started to see gains. And I came to that conclusion right before I tore my Achilles. So as I was recovering from that, the focus stayed. And coming on the other side of it is when I actually started to have an idea of like, oh, I want to make a video. This is when Instagram had started to creep up as like the main space where parkour lived. And we
Mm-hmm.
weren't seeing like yearly videos as much anymore at the time. Again, this is around like 2016, 2017. And Tom, who has been a friend of mine and someone I've worked with for
Tom
well over
Coppola,
a
right?
decade now, I helped him put together his first Ascension project. And that was just really cool. And I
Hmm.
was like, yeah, I want to do something like that. And he was starting to talk about Ascension 2 at the time, which he also finished. And so this idea for a project that was going to be about, I was like 32 years old at the time. I tore my Achilles, felt like I was better at parkour. Felt like at that time I was like 32 is pretty, to be doing like advanced parkour and doing bigger jumps and taking more impact. At the time felt kind of old, and I was like, I'm going to put this out. Uh, I did not know at the time that it would take as long as it has to actually finish the project in its entirety. Um, I suffered another injury in the middle of it, which was a lot harder to deal with than I'm still dealing with it than the Achilles tear. So that was ripping some cartilage and meniscus in my left knee, which, if you know anything about cartilage, it doesn't heal
Doesn't
the
grow
same
back.
as, and it can't be really operated on the same way as a lot of other tissues. And so there's an interesting procedure they did for that called a microfracture, which I did a few YouTube videos on. I'm actually coming up on this year. I'll be 3 years post surgery, and so I will be doing kind of a final chapter. Hopefully, recording a final chapter
Hmm.
on that, and a video that kind of goes into some of my takes on just recovering from injury, because I feel like I've had a pretty good recovery from both of the I guess what would be labeled sometimes as like career ending injuries that I
Yes.
sustained. Um, I think it would be a different. I'm not trying to pump myself up here, because I do think if I was like an elite professional athlete, I probably would no longer be an elite professional athlete.
That's the, so I was going to, there's like, okay, 15, wait, let's talk about this. Come up when I hear all that.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things right there is if you were a track sprinter and you tear your
Mm-hmm.
Achilles tendon, you don't have 2 years to wait. Like, sorry, it's like we
No.
still love you, but the team, you're a sophomore, you got to run this year and next year, and that's it.
Yeah.
And as much as I like to, and I think a lot of people like to rag on parkour for like trashing your body, unless you're really you're really paying attention, you're thinking about it, and you're reading,
Mm-hmm.
Supple Leopard and all the kinesiology books. As much as we like to say parkour trashes you, it's also because it's so governed or so self oriented. It's also
Mm-hmm.
got the space for you to go and to your side quest. Like you can actually
Yeah.
do that. I just thought that
Mm-hmm.
was like, I don't often hear people point out that, yeah, injury sucks. That's obvious. But
Mm-hmm.
parkour seems to be a pretty rare thing where you can still come back and nobody's going to be like, yeah, sorry, you missed senior year. You're out. Like, you're off the team.
Well, right now, I guess I think it's as and depending on where you're coming from, because I think if someone is say Tim Champion, right? So say Tim Champion, he's won 5 in a row SPL competitions now. So he's just revered as like skill champion of the world. Like if Tim Champion can do everything. Yeah, if he suffered a big injury, I don't know if he would be able to come back and still be in first
Mm,
place, and no one knows that but him, and hopefully it never happens to him. But that's kind of the comparison I'm making. Whereas, like, I
mm,
think I could probably advise someone who like performs at an elite level about like what worked for me and what can get them back to a similar level or even improve. But to be like dominant in a sport is an entirely different thing. To be like to be an actual like champion or to win at something is a totally other thing to remove yourself and then come back into, because that break allows the rest of the world playing that sport to catch up to whatever you were at, right? And so
mm,
for Tim right now, to maintain his dominance, he has to get better. He has to keep getting better. If he takes 2 years off, everybody catches up, I think, and then he's no longer dominant. He might say otherwise. I don't know.
Tim, if you're listening, my email address.
Yeah, he's a pretty humble
That's a
guy,
good
though.
point.
I think,
That's a
like
pretty good point.
for the most part, I don't think that's really what it's about for him. I don't think it's about. I think it's a cool probably flex for him to be able to say that he's won and that he's performed better than the people that he's up against. But I think it's also very easy for him to point out when people are better than him at something.
Hmm.
So,
Well, let me ask you a question about so motivation
mm-hmm.
wise.
Mm-hmm.
First, roughly, how many years has it been from I have an idea, which turned out to be resilient, to when the thing actually went to, like, when you were like, okay, I'm actually going to finish this, not the actual ship date, but like, it's not a 3-year project. It's like a 5 or an 8-year or a
Yeah,
10-year project. It's a big thing.
it's 6 years now. So October 2017 was the first clip.
Okay. How did you manage to stay motivated to work on that? Like,
Mm-hmm.
like, does the movement, like going out and working on a line, does that empower the working on the video? Like, what the heck? Like, how do you connect all these things
Yeah,
together to get like a self-sufficient, positive, virtuous cycle?
yeah. I think first of all, I don't really have a hard time being optimistic. Um, Someone who knows maybe more about genes or nurturing or something could maybe dissect me and tell me why. But I can
Also not me, sorry.
usually I can usually get on a positive path. I'll say pretty quickly. So when I started this thing, I actually had a kid that was working at the gym who now works full time in film, and so he was the one I was partnering with because he also did parkour. So I went from like coaching him to hiring him to now he's doing this video with me. And then when he eventually moved into film full time, which wasn't too long after we started, uh, he couldn't give me time anymore to finish it, and he wasn't reliable. So that was basically, like, if I say October 2017, I started this project at kind of like end of parkour season. So we got like 1, maybe 2 clips, and then I had to wait until like spring of the next year to get on it again, and that's when he started to kind of get flaky. And so 2018 we didn't really do much. 2019 I found another person to shoot with, and it's Mateo Welsh. He is the one who's editing at the moment, and saw it to the finish with me. But even him, because he doesn't do parkour, when I met with him, I had gone through like my friend circle, my social circle, to find, like, who's a good filmmaker. I really wanted this to be of a standard. I didn't want it to be something where I just give my phone to Tom or to whoever I'm training with and say, like, hey, can you get a clip of this? I really wanted it to be filmed, I guess, I guess the high standard or cinematic, or
Yeah, you have a
not sure
vision for
quite
what
what
a
word to put on
yeah,
it.
I don't want to I know what
Yeah.
you mean. You don't want to say high standard, because I also think that the little quickie cell phone, stuff is high standard, but yeah, you have an idea in
Yeah.
your mind of like what you wanted it to look like.
Mm-hmm. So I needed someone I could rely on for that. And in fact, like, my first shoot with Mateo was funny because he brought a standard lens, and I was like thinking about some of the stuff. Like, you got a gimbal, you're gonna be following me. I'm like, this lens is too tight. I'm like, you need a wider lens. And so that, like, this little things like that, there was a bit of a learning curve for him. But I trusted, like, the stuff that he had showed me. I trusted that he I became like a fan of a bit of his work, and so I trusted that he was going to be able to be the right person to partner on with this, because I wanted to actually keep myself out of the edit too. I wanted it to be like just explain kind of the vision, but then also
Artistic vision.
collaborate and get someone
Yeah.
else's vision involved in it. So yeah, when I partnered with him, we were kind of more or less off to the races. And the other big hurdle was that a lot of the lines that I wanted to do were things that I could not break in a single session. And so it became like I would sometimes spend like 2 months on a line, or 3 months, or in some cases years, because I would just put it off as like, this one's going to be the last one. This will
Let's
be the
shoot
last
this
one, because
later.
it's, because I found I was on this trajectory of like improving as I was going from one to the next one. I felt like, okay, it was in my head, it was like a video game where it's like, if I beat this
Hmm.
level,
Hmm.
then I can make it to the next
Unlocks the
level,
next
and
one.
I'll be like, I don't know if you're familiar with like old Mega Man, but like you get powers like for
Yeah.
each level you beat, or each person. And so I felt like I was just like gaining powers with each line that I completed for the project. Um, but that was part of what took it a very long time. And then I had to time it with scheduling with Mateo. So he's off, freelancing, shooting his own stuff. Not a parkour guy, not a guy who I'm going to be like, hey, let's go out and I'm going to go take a look at it today. Let's see if I can do it. And there were a couple wasted shoots where I would schedule with him and then show up and not have broken whatever the challenge was and been like, yeah, I'm not doing it today. Uh, and so what would end up happening is I would usually have to put in work and actually complete something, then give him a
Hmm.
call and like, okay, we're going to go shoot it. So it wouldn't be the first, or like when I would break a jump or break a challenge, that would not be when we would shoot it. It would be like the second or third time would be when we shoot it, except for the last two. The last two only happened when I was shooting with him.
I'm thinking one takeaway is don't try to build things all entirely on your own. It's a recipe for insanity and overwork. But
Yeah.
also, I'm wondering. So I'm imagining really well-known filmmakers, directors. They wind up with a fingerprint.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to bother name drop, right? So it's not that I know any big filmmakers, but not in parkour space, like big blockbuster films. You're like, oh, I know whose film this is. You can just like see it in the DNA of the film. So it
Mm-hmm.
feels to me like you're describing that the thing you've created, I don't know whether you call it a movie or a film or a documentary, is like it's René. Like René is in it because you're physically in it, but René is so in the thing. Can you imagine? Could you ever make something that would be really different? Like, could you ever make something that somebody would look at and not guess? I mean, maybe René is physically in the image, but like, can you imagine? Okay, now could you take the DNA out and make a
Mm-hmm.
different kind of film?
I mean, I think that's actually my mission for the next couple of years, is to do some things that are a bit different than because this took so much time, and so I felt like I was
Yeah, like 6 years.
yeah, right. Um, and at the start of it, it was I wanted to make in my mind like the perfect parkour film. I had a vision for the perfect parkour film
Mm.
that was never happening. Um, and then I just was like, okay, I guess I'll just be the one that I'll make it. And a lot of it had to do with okay, so I'll try to draw a comparison here. And maybe some of your listeners, or maybe you've heard of it, but there was a video that dropped, I'm going to say maybe 2010-ish era, called Parkour Literally. And I believe there's also a Parkour Literally 2.
I think I've only seen two,
Um,
but okay.
and this is, I think his name is pronounced Naeem, filmed it, and forgetting the name of the guy that starred in it, but it starts, with the definition of parkour, the classic one, the A to B, and then it takes off, and it's these longer like A to B lines. But the thing I never really liked about it was that a lot of the structures are things like, oh, he could just run around that, or that's not actually the fastest way. Like he's still,
I see your point.
because even
Yeah.
even when we do parkour in like traditional, I like to
What we
we like to
say
call it
is the
traditional
traditional.
parkour.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of moves that aren't really efficient, that aren't going to get you anywhere really fast. And sometimes the actual efficient is quite boring because a lot of it's just running, right? Is just running from place to place. And so
Mm-hmm.
um, the mission for the project was to find the lines that hit that, but that I also thought were cool.
Yeah, that's the
And
only
sometimes, and
option.
I
This
think,
is you want to go that way, you got to do these things.
yeah, and I think some of them nailed that, and some of them are like, yeah, you'll watch it and be like, yeah, he could have ran around that. There's a couple in there where it was like the challenge was cool, but like, yeah, it probably would have been faster to run around. But that was the vision, was lines that had like actual barriers, actual gaps that needed to be jumped.
Yeah,
Um,
real drops to get from here to
uh,
there in a straight line or go way around.
yeah, a handle on advanced parkour and um, being able to execute that. And so uh, I managed to do all of them also like in mostly like downtown Vancouver, which if you've for people that have visited, Vancouver is the city of glass is the nickname. So it doesn't lend itself to parkour as well as some older cities that tend to have like mega spots of like concrete wall after concrete wall. It's usually like aluminum glass railing after aluminum glass railing. um, just like you just walk by and you're like, yeah, I'm gonna break that if I land on it, so I'm not gonna do it. But it does have some gems, and it does have a lot of little back alleys and stuff. And so part of what took so long was just finding the right spots, finding the right locations. I tried to actually film a fair bit of lines at some of our hotspots, so some of the areas in Vancouver that get trained at a lot. And part of the reason for that was I wanted to kind of like set something where if I saw a jump or a path or something difficult that I hadn't seen anyone do yet, I wanted to do it, film it, and then put it out, because I'm hoping that some of the kids that I'm coaching and stuff go and like
Go
one
and
up
do the things.
everything that I
Let me
do.
let me pull you back if I can. So you said looking forward, you were thinking, and it sounded like you were going to describe a different vision. So if resilient is that first idea that you
Mm-hmm.
had, what are
Mm-hmm.
you imagining for the vision for the second one? Or if you don't want to let out of the bag, because then you're
Um,
kind of on the hook.
yeah, no. Uh, so my math kind of got messed up because I always have a tricky time landing on like exactly when I started parkour. I'm pretty sure it was like the end of 2003. So I kind of called this like my 20th year. My first jam was March 2004. Um, and so I've actually been saving other clips this year that I have allowed other people to film for me, that I haven't posted. I've just kept because I wanted to do like a 20-year video as well.
Mm,
I intended to finish the other one sooner, but I wanted to do a 20-year video as well. And so some of those are like similar sort of. I mean, that's my game, is the more
yeah,
like A to
classic
B
line.
type stuff. But there's also like a handful of stuff in there that's definitely not. That branches out a bit. It's been a minute since I have tried to train flips. I remember in the early days of parkour, I would go to the gymnastics gym with the friends, and like I would just do like hundreds of front flips because I just wanted to get like good enough. Like it was, I had this weird mindset of like, you don't branch out and try other flips until you have like one down. So it was just like front flip and then back flip and then side flip. Um, but it's been like a minute since I've actually tried to like get better at any of them. When I opened Origins, I was able to take at least like front flips and back flips outside and start putting them into lines and things. And that only lasted a season because I suddenly got scared again. Flips have always been a struggle for me because I feel like they're not a bit as intuitive for me to progress as parkour is, and I can't make the same sort of incremental progressions as I feel like I can with parkour techniques. Like I don't know, even heights. I always feel like with heights, I can just expose myself to more height and expose
Yeah.
myself to like taking bigger steps or bigger jumps at height, and then eventually get around it. And it just becomes this very easy thing for me to, not easy, but simple. So it's still hard, but it's a
Clear.
simple thing to
Yeah.
program. Whereas flips, sometimes like some people are just built better for them, I feel like, but there's just this thing where like you just got to slam thousands of times sometimes before like you land your uh, first clean flip. And there's just always so much to work on with parkour that you end up putting aside whatever doesn't come as easily. And yeah, flips never have, but I've always just kind of tucked it away as something like, what, I can spend time here whenever. I feel like if I'm trying to do like bigger jumps, there's like a smaller window of time because I'm eventually gonna tip off in power output. but like flips and other freestyle type moves, I feel like I can age with those a little better. This also could be like just an example of hubris that I'm eventually going to have a rude awakening to and not be able to make any progression.
I hope not.
But yeah,
Rude awakening is
I think
rude.
if we're gonna if we're gonna expect anything out of me, I would say it's might be more of that in the future. It's just trying to be a bit more playful, a bit more loose. And I think that was harder to do in the early days of parkour. I think scenes and communities were a little meaner. Like when I started parkour, if you tried something that was a little like, I'll see some stuff these days where someone like Matt McCreary or Kevin Franzen or Egg, and they'll be like messing around and
Yeah.
trying
The
some things.
playful
And
comes out. Yes. Now that's
it's
like,
just
that's a
so
thing.
accepted now. Yeah, it's so accepted. So like even if you say that an Instagram post with like something that you're kind of playing with, just like a different hand placement or grab or turn or spin, it's just so loved now. Whereas back in the day,
Yeah.
I think it would just get hated on so much. And so I'm not blaming that as the reason why I've never branched out. And I'm just happy that it's more accepted in parkour now. That like experimentation is just more accepted. So
We've gone
I'm
a
trying to
long way
embrace
here.
it.
Give me the tell me more about the gym. Like, where's the gym online? And if people want to find more about the gym, I don't want to get the domain name wrong.
Originsparkour.com.
And
I think if
there's two
you're like,
locations, but they're both in British Columbia,
yeah,
right?
yep. So I mean, if you're local, definitely hit us up. Otherwise, I think if you're not local, you'll probably find more on like origins.pk. And we're really we've taken some breaks in like the frequency of content we're putting out, but we're really trying to put out content that is on that like more branded towards like worldwide. So not just touching on like promotion of like the gym or gyms locally, but like more
I don't know if I
worldwide.
actually said it in the recording here, but STS, which is, I hate to call it a podcast because it's a video. It's way more than just what I call a podcast. There are a couple of those. There are a ton of those. And I really think that people would do well if like René is saying things and make you go, wait, tell me more. You can find different STS videos that will talk about these different aspects. This is not René's first rodeo with a microphone. So where do you like them to go for finding STS? Is that off of, I know you can find it off of the
YouTube
gym, but
is great.
yeah.
Origins Parkour, YouTube is great. I think that's where we're trying to grow. If it's better for you to listen on to Apple Podcasts or Spotify,
Yeah,
that
works too.
We were talking about pre-show. We were talking about podcasts a bit, and I'm probably going to hit you up about upload situations and things because I feel like
delighted to do anything I can to
we
help.
don't know.
I hate
Yeah,
tech.
when it comes to the
Tech is
audio upload,
yeah.
I don't know what I'm doing. So
don't say that on mic. You know what you're doing. You're awesome. We'll fix that later. And if people are going, tell us where we should be hovering when they want to see Resilient. I mean, I'm sure you'll drop like an IG, whatever, but like, where would you want them to go? Should they be on an email list? Should they be on the website? Where should they be?
Subscribe to Origins Parkour on YouTube. Hit the bell. That'll let you know.
Sweet.
Yeah.
What else have we flown by that we want to touch on in our remaining minutes? Anything else in there? You're like, ooh, we haven't talked about competition. We haven't talked about Sport Parkour League. We haven't talked about, there was another thing. Yeah, I'm not gonna be able to pull it up. I had another idea we didn't talk about. Anything else top of mind?
Yeah, we haven't announced yet, but SPL3 will be happening. It'll be happening at Origins in Vancouver again. That's always an interesting time. I always have to wear like two hats because it is officially also on paper a separate business, and it's one that I don't actually make any money off of. It's purely an investment at this point. But yeah, I'm always finding wearing two hats for that. So we get into competition prep, and I'm always thinking, oh God, I have to make a bunch more challenges, or we have to design courses and challenges and do something new and different. And we're going to have a lot of the same athletes show up. And so I end up coming to this point where I have to make a decision, usually for all right, we're going to maybe build something new in the gym or change one of our temporary setups. And I need to do it in a way that's going to be useful for the competition, but also useful for when we reopen for classes and things. Particularly if it's a permanent structure, particularly if it's like I'm building something permanent, it has to be useful for that. And it's definitely easier to do one or the other. It's a challenge to do both at the same time.
Integration is always hard. Cool. All right. I guess I'm just watching our time tick by, but this doesn't have to be the only time we ever talk. I will just say, and of course, the final question, 3 words to describe your practice.
Yeah. So first two aren't going to come as a surprise here. I'll go with focused. So again, you could interpret that as I'm very narrow-minded with my approach to parkour. Second word is relentless, and that's just a fancy way of me saying stubborn. I recently learned what is it? Solomon's paradox. I don't know if you've heard of this.
I don't think so. Hit me.
So it's a biblical thing that I recently learned about. So King Solomon, was supposed to be renowned for giving great advice, but his life was in shambles because he did not follow his own advice. And a lot of times I feel like that's me with training, is I'll have something even currently sitting right here. I have little pains and things, and I'm going to be in the gym later and in the gym tomorrow training. So relentless is kind of my fancy way of saying probably like stubborn and stupid with some of my decisions that I make with training. And the last word is wonder, which is maybe less expected. But one of the things that I enjoy the most, and I still enjoy today, is I've recently got back to taking the train for commuting. So I live closer to our main gym, and so I'll commute to our Port Moody studio, and I'll go by train. And every time it is a pleasure for me because I just look out the window, and I'm still 20 years in, just looking at spots and looking at what if we go there? What if we try this? And it'll be the same day. Have we gone there yet? We haven't gone there yet. I'm going to have to make a note to go there for the summer. And just imagining possibilities with parkour. And I don't think that's ever going to stop for me. I think I'll be, if I ever get into a car accident one day, that'll be why. Because I'll be just staring at a spot as I drive by and not react fast enough to get back on the road and follow traffic.
Well, Renee, those are, as I say, those are good words. I don't think wonder. I didn't find that surprising, but I guess maybe people might know you better and think that's surprising. I'll buy wonder, and I'm no prognosticating about car accidents. None of that. It was, honestly, a great pleasure to get a chance to talk, and I really appreciate you taking the time. You were really zippy about like, hey, would you? Yes. Oh, here he's in my schedule already. So thank you so much for making my life so easy, and I hope you have a terrific rest of your day.
Thanks, man. It was a pleasure.